Beyond the gates, spoilers tease that buried truths claw their way to the surface, exposing lies that have festered in the shadows of Fairmont Crest for decades. No one could have predicted that a child, stolen at birth and hidden behind carefully constructed facades, would become the fulcrum upon which destinies would pivot. Eva's existence, shrouded in secrecy since her very first cries, now stands poised to shatter lives, unravel loyalties, and force each player to confront the frightening depths of their own betrayals. Sharon's memories of her daughter's birth remain vivid to this day. The sterile fragrance of the hospital corridor, the bright fluorescent lights cradling her in harsh glare, and the searing pain of labor that only intensified when Leslie, posing as a trusted friend, held Sharon's battered hand too firmly and stared at the emerging world as though planning a conquest. When Eva finally entered the world, pink and howling, Sharon felt an overwhelming surge of love, an unbreakable bond forming in that instant she laid eyes on her newborn's face. But in the next heartbeat, Leslie was there to greet the world first, pressing Jason into Sharon's arms only to have him pass the baby to Leslie, who vanished through the delivery room door before Sharon could even whisper, "She's mine." Doctors and nurses, convinced Leslie was Sharon's and visiting with joy in her eyes, offered no resistance. And so, within minutes, Eva slipped from Sharon's grasp into Leslie's calculated arms, and Sharon's world narrowed to a silent scream she could not utter. Sharon's grief became a fire that consumed her, forging her into a woman determined to reclaim what was stolen. She anchored herself at Fairmont Crest, the sprawling estate of the Hayworth family, believing that somewhere within those ivy-dripping walls lay the answer to her daughter's disappearance. She had confronted Leslie months later in a dusty hallway lined with ancestral portraits, Leslie's secrets entombed beneath her poised smile. "You'll never take her from me," Sharon had spat, trembling but unbowed. Leslie merely cocked her head, green eyes glittering, as though Sharon were nothing more than a child she intended to correct. "Eva is safe with me," she whispered, voice cool as marble. And Sharon, overcome by rage and maternal dread, was forced back, her arms aching for an infant she had only held once. Years passed, and Sharon's agony became her endless companion. She combed through records, traced familial connections, followed rumors that sputtered out before they could take flame until Vernon arrived. Vernon, a distant cousin of the Hayworths, had lived his entire life in the shadow of Fairmont Crest's secrets. He had walked its hallways as a boy, watched board dinners as a teething child, and learned early that an estate built on old money and older sins could hide more than dusty heirlooms. He watched Sharon's dogged searches from afar, noting the anguish that flickered across her face whenever she passed the wrought iron gates. Yet it wasn't until Vernon stumbled upon a fragment of a moth-eaten journal in his grandmother's locked bureau that he realized the truth was far more startling than any whispered rumor. The journal, penned in a spidery hand, belonged to Theodore Ted Whittington, a name Vernon knew only as a footnote in the family tree. The entry detailed a clandestine liaison between Ted and a young Sharon Donovan before either could imagine the twist of fate that would rip their families apart. "Sharon's pregnancy," the entry read, "was reason enough for me to imagine a future beyond my father's wealth. But my father would never consent, and Leslie demanded to hold what I had helped shape." Vernon's heart pounded as he read. Leslie had not only helped herself to the estate's influence, but had orchestrated Eva's adoption into a false identity. Ted's guilt-sodden words spoke of a plan hatched behind the pillared facade of Fairmont Crest. "I watched as Leslie whisked away my daughter, our blood, our legacy, sealed in secrecy at the cost of Sharon's torment." This revelation sent Vernon into a frenzy. He could not yet fathom how to confront Leslie. The woman remained a paragon of respectability within Hayworth's society. But he knew that Sharon's every sleepless night, her every bitter tear, had been born from a truth that had slumbered in those pages. He spent long nights poring over Ted's scribblings, mapping the cryptic notes to the estate's convoluted archives. Hidden within a ledger of estate expenses was a notation of unusual costs, a large sum paid to St. Felicia's orphanage, a longtime front for private adoptions that catered to clients with the means to secure what they wanted, no questions asked. Further inspection revealed that the orphanage's records had been doctored, Eva's birth certificate bore dates swapped, locations altered. A veil of bureaucratic lies had cloaked Eva's identity so thoroughly that even Sharon, desperate for a shred of evidence, had been thwarted. As dawn crept over the turrets of Fairmont Crest, Vernon finally located the room where Leslie had kept her private trove of secrets, a hidden chamber behind a bookshelf in the library, accessible only by a secret latch carved into the marble mantel. Pushing the shelf aside revealed a dimly lit space strewn with the evidence of Leslie's lifelong machinations, letters to Ted that had never been sent, praising his discretion. Photographs of a rosy-faced toddler with chocolate-brown hair, the only image Leslie had kept of Eva before dispatching her to live with anonymous adoptive parents, and a ledger that cataloged the expenses of raising Eva in secrecy. Each page dripped with Leslie's arrogance. She had spared no expense ensuring that Eva believed Sharon had died in childbirth, while Leslie played doting aunt and mentor in the shadows. Vernon's palms sweat as he sifted through the evidence, his heart aching at the realization that Eva had grown up believing a woman whose only claim to motherhood was a stolen moment. He imagined Eva now. Was she aware of her true lineage? Did she wonder why she felt drawn to Fairmont Crest? The answers hovered just out of reach, but Vernon knew he must reveal the truth. He tore the ledger from its binding, knowing that time would not be his ally. Leslie would discover the breach soon enough. Clutching the fragile pages, he retreated to the sunlit courtyard, where Sharon had taken to wandering, her silhouette dwarfed by the stone columns. She lifted her eyes when he approached, the lines of grief etched across her face, softening momentarily at the sight of him. Ted wrote it all down. Vernon began, voice thick. Sharon's breath caught, her gaze narrowing as she sensed the gravity of his words. Your daughter Eva, she's alive. Sharon's knees buckled, and Vernon caught her just as she crumpled to the marble steps, her sobs rising to the sky. Vernon held her as though the embrace could transfer the strength she would need to face what lay ahead. Sharon's tears drenched his shirt, but he remained unmoving, a silent sentinel witnessing the shattering of her world as she knew it. They spent the morning in the old chapel tucked behind the estate, the one with the arch-stained glass windows that painted the pews in fractured colors. Vernon laid out Ted's journal, the photographs, the forged certificates on the pew's wooden seat. Sharon stared at them, eyes wide, disbelief contorting her face. Each photograph was a dagger, the child whose face she had never known, whose smile she had only glimpsed in stolen images, now stared out at her as if daring her to claim what had always been hers. The chapel's hush was broken only by Sharon's ragged breaths and the soft rustle of the stained glass wind. I thought I would die first, Sharon whispered, voice raw. Vernon's throat tightened. Leslie stole her at birth, he said gently. You have to understand, Ted confessed. In writing, Leslie held her all these years, raised her under a false name. Eva doesn't know the truth yet. Sharon closed her eyes, hands trembling as she clasped the ledger. We have to tell her, she said. But how? She's never known me. She's never known Ted. Vernon swallowed. We find her, he said. We bring her here. You see what kind of life she's lived. Then you decide when she's ready to learn who she really is. Over the following days, Vernon and Sharon worked to piece together Eva's life. They discovered that Leslie had arranged for Eva to be adopted by a distant cousin, a childless couple in a neighboring county who lost their daughter to illness when Eva was born. The couple, Mary and Philip Carlton, raised Eva as their own, and she grew into a striking young woman, intelligent, compassionate, yet haunted by a persistent longing she could not name. Vernon tracked down the Carltons' address, a cottage nestled on the edge of a mist-veiled forest, where the sunlight filtered through birch leaves and painted the dirt road in dappled gold. When Sharon first saw Eva through the Carlton's front gate, time seemed to stop. Eva was in the garden, hands caked in soil as she tended to a bed of wildflowers, a living testament to her adoptive parents' influence, her loyalty to life's fragile beauty. She looked up, expression curious, the morning sun catching the russet highlights in her hair. Sharon's breath caught in her throat. The resemblance to Ted was unmistakable. Eva's eyes, the shape of her lips, the small cleft in her chin. It was as if time had folded, bringing mother and daughter face to face after years of forced separation. Vernon hovered behind Sharon, hooded gaze steady as he watched Eva turn back to her flowers. He gently touched Sharon's arm. "Do you see her?" he asked. Sharon whispered, "She's beautiful." The word tasted like both triumph and sorrow. They waited until Mary and Philip invited Sharon and Vernon inside, their hospitality warm, but laced with defensiveness. How could they not see Sharon's pain? How could they not feel the tremor in her voice when she spoke of two lost souls seeking each other? Eva's laugh, a clear, sweet note, echoed through the Carlton's living room as she greeted them. There was a flicker of confusion on her face when she encountered Sharon's gaze, an instinctive recognition that left her blinking. "Can I help you?" she asked, voice steady yet cautious. Sharon took a trembling breath. "My name is Sharon Donovan," she said. I'm your mother." Eva's eyes narrowed, disbelief paling her face as she whispered, "That's not possible." Sharon lifted the photographs, passing them to Eva with a trembling hand. "These are your first months," she said. "Leslie took you from me. I've fought for you all your life." Eva sank onto the plush rug, the photographs slipping to the floor as though they burned her fingers. She studied the images, her infant self swaddled in Leslie's arms, a hospital scene where Leslie's face loomed triumphantly over Sharon's anguish-stricken one. Why would she do this? Eva's voice trembled, tears pooling in her eyes. Philip pressed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Eva, Leslie, she believed she was protecting you. In her way," he said quietly. "She told us your birth mother died, that she was giving you to us because she could no longer care for you." Eva's chest heaved with sobs as she stared at Sharon. "Why didn't you fight for me?" she wailed. Sharon knelt beside her, placing trembling hands on Eva's knees. "I did," she said. "But Leslie made sure no one in the world would believe me. I watched your every imagined victory, every birthday celebration on Facebook. They all bore Leslie's lies that I had paid to keep away. I thought I had lost you forever." Eva's tears fell heavy, each drop a reckoning. "So everything I believed about myself, it was a lie." Sharon's tears mingled with hers. "No," she whispered fiercely. "You are the same woman, my daughter. You are brave, kind, and the light of my life. Everything Leslie stole cannot erase what you are." Eva looked up, eyes blazing. "Then why did it take you so long to come for me?" Sharon's voice cracked. "I was broken. I didn't know if confronting her would kill me." Eva's gaze hardened. "But I needed to know. I needed to know my truth." In the days that followed, Eva returned to Fairmont Crest with Sharon and Vernon. She explored the vast rooms, each echoing footsteps stirring memories she never knew she had. The library where Vernon had found the hidden chamber now looked to her like the locus of every lie she had believed. Sharon walked beside her, recounting bedtime stories Leslie had told, pointing out the spots where she had once sat, awaiting her child's return. With each revelation, Eva's anger and tenderness warred within her at Leslie's treachery, sorrow for the years lost, and a fierce love toward the mother she had never known. Leslie watched from the shadows of the grand staircase, her composure a brittle mask. She had never anticipated that the threads of her deception would be unraveled so thoroughly, nor that Eva herself would stand before her, strong yet wounded. When she finally confronted them in the drawing room chamber suffused with afternoon light, Leslie's eyes flickered with regret, envy, and something rawer, darker. "You should have stayed away," she hissed at Sharon. "You have no right to take her from me." Eva stood beside Sharon, fingers curled into fists. "You stole my life," she said flatly. Leslie's lip curled. "I gave you a life. You were unwanted. I saved you from a mother who would have discarded you." Eva's eyes burned. "My mother never would have discarded me. You stole me for your own vanity." Vernon stepped forward, anger and pity warring in his gaze. "Leslie, you believed you were protecting your family name. But in doing so, you destroyed an entire life." Leslie's shoulders slumped, as though the weight were more than she could bear. "She would have ruined everything for Ted and me," Leslie muttered, voice breaking. "We loved her." Eva's laugh was bitter. "You love my power to fill your emptiness." The confrontation ended without blows, but the fissures in each heart ran deep. Eva watched Leslie retreat to her private chamber, shoulders quivering not with remorse, but with the terror of being faced by a truth she had long evaded. Sharon turned to Eva, placing a gentle hand on her cheek. "You're safe now," she whispered. "You belong here with me." Eva closed her eyes, letting the warmth of her mother's touch anchor her. Yet even as the family reunited, they knew the path ahead was fraught. Eva would have to reconcile the identity she had known with the one she was now embracing, and Sharon would have to confront the toll of years spent chasing a phantom. In the weeks that followed, Eva settled into Fairmont Crest, moving into the small cottage Ted had once built for his young lovers long before his noble blood led him astray. She discovered journals hidden beneath floorboards, Ted's confessions, apologies, and expressions of hope that she would one day know her truth. Sharon accompanied her to the dusty attic of the estate, where wedding gowns and mourning attire hung on rusted racks, relics of a lineage built on both celebration and sorrow. Each garment told a fragment of a story: weddings whose promises cracked under societal pressures, funerals where grief was a mask for deeper betrayals. Together, Sharon and Eva realized that their family's history was written in layers of loss and restoration, and that they were now tasked with forging a new chapter. As summer melted into autumn, Eva enrolled in classes at the local university, studying art history and restoration fields that resonated with her drive to bring hidden things back to light. Sharon watched with pride as Eva mingled with classmates in the estate's sun-drenched gallery, sharing laughter and ideas without the slightest hint of the stolen years that menaced behind her smile. Vernon, now a fixture in Eva's life, took pleasure in seeing her reclaim the book-lined halls of Fairmont Crest, where he once wandered aimlessly, burdened by the weight of secrets. Together, they hosted an exhibition of Ted's forgotten paintings, landscapes that echoed the family's fractured legacy. Eva guided visitors through each canvas, explaining the strokes of hope and despair intertwined within. Yet even as they embraced this fragile harmony, shadows lingered at the periphery. Leslie's departure from Fairmont Crest had left a vacuum of power, one that distant relatives eyed with covetous intent. The Hayworths, once unified under Leslie's steely stewardship, now risked fracturing into factions. Eva sensed the tremors beneath their civility, whispered negotiations over property rights, lawsuits filed against the estate's finances, distant cousins sniffing at the gates of inheritance. She realized that her recovery of the family name came at a cost. She would have to defend it not only from lies of the past, but from ambitions of the present. One dusk, as leaves turned amber and drifted down the gravel drive, Eva found herself in the library with Sharon, standing before the hidden chamber's threshold. The rusted lock demanded a secret latch, which Eva had learned to trace under Vernon's guidance. Opening the door revealed the worn ledger and photographs once used to shackle her to a false identity. Eva placed a gentle hand on the leather binding, as though drawing strength from the truth bound within. Sharon joined her, hand resting on Eva's shoulder. "You've come a long way," Sharon whispered. Eva nodded. and I have a long way to go. But I know who I am now. Their reflection in the glass framed the bookshelves behind them, shelves lined not only with tomes, but with memories. The journals Sharon had written while chasing a ghost, the ledger Vernon discovered. Eva's childhood sketches showing glimpses of a longing she could never define. In that moment, Eva realized that their family's story did not hinge on who stole whom, but on the bonds they would forge moving forward. She closed the ledger gently and turned the lock, sealing it once more. "The past is here," she said, "but it no longer controls us." As the last rays of sunlight retreated behind the turrets, Eva, Sharon, and Vernon stepped back into the main hall. The estate's chandeliers glowed softly, illuminating the path ahead. Outside, the iron gates of Fairmont Crest stood sentinel, a silent promise that though the world might seek to breach their sanctuary again, they would face it together, armed with the unyielding power of truth. And so, the gates of deception closed at last, not to confine them, but to protect the fragile light they had rekindled within each other's hearts.